So, continuing from some of the gangster stories, a day or two after this, I was, still thinking, what's the story? What the hell happened? What does this mean? What shall I do with this? Who can I ask that to sort of confirm about what happened and find out whether, this very impressive guy we met who was rich enough to buy a skyscraper complex and everything around it with his own money, and you know, and in 5 minutes could call 200 men to protect him. Um, you know, Gotta ask somebody. So, who did I call? Well, no one else I thought was better than a buddy of mine called Cody. And Cody was a very interesting lady herself, which deserves, maybe this should be titled not gangsters, but maybe I can give this the whole story itself. So, Cody was a Ginza club mama-san. She owned, well, ownership, I don't know how financially, whatever, but she was the definitely the manager, if not the owner, of a club in Ginza. And Ginza is the high class area of Tokyo. Now, and this is kind of a hierarchy in these systems. At the moment, I don't remember the hierarchy of how these go. But you know, there are many clubs which are called snack bars, and they do have slightly different systems to what they call a club, which is not a nightclub, but a, once again, these are all little bars where you go in. There are there are women who are there to serve the clients, to build the ego, to pour their drinks, make them have a good time, and they charge, by the table, or sometimes by the hour. You might get charged, 30, 40, 50 um, dollars, say, for an hour of the time that you're in this club. And there's different systems. I haven't really been enough of them to be an expert, but for example, you can go in and pay your base rate fee, and then on top of that you've got extras, depending on what you eat and what you drink. And then if there's a particular girl there that you want to talk to, want to come to your table, there might be an extra charge, and she'll spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, for example, and then say, oh, excuse me, I have another customer over there who's there to see me. And so these girls will actually circulate through the table saying hello, building relationships, building friendships with customers. And the idea is that they build regular clients who come into the club, who will bring their friends, and after some time might establish a relationship where they might start meeting their customers for dinner, maybe before they go to the club, and then maybe even after they go to the club they might go out and have some ramen, have some sushi, maybe go have a drink together, and which takes the relationship to another level. But it could take weeks, months, or years to develop a relationship to the point where, yes, you could, start to meet outside. But that's also a fee which you pay for. They're called dohan, which is, and the girls actually, because it's a charge thing, the girls earn more money for that, and they also um, can increase their ranking in the club themselves, because within these clubs, say there's 15, 20 girls working in a club, they have a ranking, who's number one, who makes the most money this month. And they very proudly say, oh, this month I was number one girl, and everybody goes yay, and they might have a little celebration. There might be a little bonus, financial bonus, or something otherwise. So it's kind of, it's McDonald's employee of the month. They get to be queen for, I don't know how long that lasts. But what that does, it encourages competition among the girls, so that they are, working harder to please their clients, and they will get to know the details of the clients. They will know their birthdays, they will know their shoe size, they know what color, what kind of ties they might like, and on their birthday they will make sure they will bring a present, and it'll, they'll bring a Versace tie, or it would be a handkerchief, or a sweater, or something quite personal, maybe a pen, or and they will know the details of their life, their wants, their likes, all those kind of things, and they'll be sending them messages, and maybe they go on holiday, and there's a lot of things in Japanese society which require communication at sort of times of the year that you give greetings. If you followed the traditional Japanese culture, every time the season changes, there's a greeting card that you might send, or there's a gift that you might send between business friends, or if you're a professor at university, and students would do this. When I was a student at university, I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I was told, but I very rarely did. But you're supposed to gift your professor certain things at certain times of years, or even just writing postcards, making a note. And you'd start them in the summertime. You might start the phrase with, oh, the days are becoming hotter and more humid, and you know please take care in the heat, and it's been a long time since I've done my homework, but I'm so happy that you are there to guide me. And oh, yes, and the season is changing a bit colder, so I've included something to help you get through the sticky, humid months. Whatever, they're actually very nice parts of society. But in the club culture, you also how well uh, a a hostess looks after her client is, or will come back to her in the client spending more money at the club, bringing more people along, and probably inviting her out, and bringing her gifts, because it goes both ways. She might give him a scarf, but he'll bring her a Louis Vuitton handbag. Or and eventually it'll escalate to maybe a trip to an onsen, which is a hot spring. Could be and of course it'll be a five-star hotel. And whether there'll be anything physical or not is, it's also part of the Japanese culture. It's also very subtle as well. So this depends on when we get into the class of the club. When it's the higher class, the physical aspect of the relationship is more subtle. It's longer. It requires more time. In the cheaper versions of the snack or lounge industry, yeah, there's it could be more like an instant service. Yeah. But they say in Ginza, they say, oh no, the Ginza girls don't sleep with their clients. No, 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 not the Ginza ladies, no, because they're considered to be at the top end. And of course, even more traditionally speaking, this whole industry which exists in Japan comes from that courtesan culture, which of course we know about the geisha culture, where people are trained from childhood to entertain guests culturally, and the physical side they also trained in, but it's a very, once again, relationships are formed very exclusively and at a very high price, and yeah, and very ceremoniously. So, but of course, real life tends to filter down. We have these these concepts of things being so fancy and whatever. But of course, you can walk down any street corner and somebody can throw on a kimono and and pretend they're geisha, and a foreigner wouldn't know. But yeah, but once again, it's it's part of the culture. Westerners find it very strange, um, you know, and but you see, the point for the most of the male clients is that they're building relationships, kind of friendships, while she is building his ego. And as a result, many things do happen, whether they end up going into businesses together, maybe the client funds them so that they leave and start their own club or their business, etc. Many things can happen, of course, because of that, but it's all based on long-term forming trust and forming relationships, and having fun. The girl's job is So the guys are going to relax. They have stress. So the line is that they have very highly stressful lives, a lot of pressure from society. So yeah, people come to basically to relax and yeah, and to have fun. And it causes a kind of schizophrenia in Japan because at work, somebody might be a deputy minister of the economy or whatever, or he's the head of a large company and you see him working and you think, wow, this guy's just really tough and hard and strict. And you see them in the evening at a club like that and they're acting like a 10-year-old child. They're going all googly eyed over a girl in a mini skirt and then they might end up with it by the end of the night. They've got their tie around their head and their shirts open, and some guys might even drop their pants at some stage for a laugh. And other guys asleep in the corner. A couple of them probably vomiting in the street, and it's all just like, haha, whatever. He's fine, leave him alone. And I'm looking at the stuff, going, this is bizarre, man. I mean, we've had a bit of fun. People are singing karaoke and telling jokes, but you know, it's like it can get to the point where anything seems to be okay, and and the next day it's back to Mr. Serious work. It's all, you don't talk about what happened last night. You just like go on and do it until the next time. And it's like, wow, you know? So you got this pressure cooker society, and this is the safety valve. This is how people, I guess, survive the pressures of life. But of course, it became kind of addictive, right? Because some of these clubs are very expensive, and if a guy is a small business owner, he might be spending a good wicket of his salary or the company's money into these clubs, and I in the more wealthier or the more, I had to say, when the economy was really doing really well, as everybody quotes the bubble period in Japan where everything went crazy, all the stuff was just five, six, seven times the price. People were spending $10,000 a night. So on that just one night that we'd met the Yakuza boss, I'd seen him pay out nearly um, $3,000. I would say dollars, and sometimes the yen's up and down, whatever. But the kind of the equivalent of putting down $3,000 just for a few hours sitting there. So you imagine when somebody's really having fun and they're like shouting, and they're ordering bottles of Dom Perignon or champagne, and some of these clubs, order a special bottle, and the bottle itself might be $5,000, or and everybody's clapping and cheering and they're giving out stuff left, right, and center. So you know, some of these people who are either acting rich or are very wealthy are spending a lot of big money in these clubs. So, and it's a world once again because I've never been earning that much to feel like I could just go and blow $10,000 in one night. Uh, Once again, most of us Westerners don't really get it, and you know. So anyway, Kaori was in the high class center, which was Ginza, famous for luxury products, and all the flagship stores have their, Louis Vuitton and Dior and everything. They're all there. Of course, they're in every city anywhere in Tokyo, but their headquarters normally would be Ginza. Any product you've got, if it says Ginza on it, then if it's a chocolate cake, if it has Ginza on it, it's like, oh, it's from Ginza. People say, "Oh, where'd you get that?" Oh, I got it from Ginza, and it has this long sort of historical modern Japan. We're talking sort of historical context of means luxury, and it's very nice and very clean and very orderly in that area. Um, though it wasn't controlled by the Inagawa Kai, I think the Sumiyoshi Kai, Sumiyoshi Yakuza group was in charge of that area. Um, so yeah, so Kaori was a friend. I met her through my friend. Oh, that's right. That's right. My friend Mohammed, it's another story, was dating her for a while because Mohammed would when we lived in Roppongi and Nishiazabu, actually it was 5 minutes walk from Roppongi. We had the whole drinking district, one of many, but Roppongi is famous for foreigners, I would say. we had the whole foreigner district 5 minutes walk from our house. And so he spent 4 or 5 nights out there, um, just, and he'd come back at crazy times of the morning, and then he'd go to work the next day. So that's another story in itself. But for example, he might work a full day at work. He'd come back at 8 o'clock, have something to eat. He would sleep for 3 hours. He'd get up at 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, go out because we were that was going every night, and he'd come back at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. So he'd been drinking the whole night, pulled off three hours sleep or 4 hours sleep, and often he would actually go straight back to work. Now, the people he was meeting at that time of the morning from, like I did it too sometimes, of course, but I also had jobs to do too, so I couldn't do it on a weekday really. But sometimes, if I had free time, but the crowd that tends to come out after 1 o'clock in the morning are the girls who have finished their job at the hostess bars, because the hostess bars normally they finish from about 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning, because most of the trains finish at midnight, and most of the clients who are coming to those hostess clubs, they've got families to go home to. They also have a job the next day, so maybe from 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. It might even be just 11 to 12. Maybe they'll be finishing the night at a snack bar. Then they go home, and the girls, of course, they don't start work until the next day. Maybe they got a date with a client, dinner with a client, maybe at 6 or 7 o'clock. But their real work, I don't think starts till like 9 or 10 o'clock. So it depends on the club. So these girls, they go out to party then, and that's when they make their own lives and their own fun and their own boyfriends, etc. So my friend flatmate Mohammed, who he was working at the the United Nations University at the time, while he was finishing his PhD in engineering. Um, he would yeah, he would go out a lot, and he was meeting some very interesting characters. Of course, I was as well, but I couldn't keep up with his level of alcohol consumption. This guy would break a bottle open of whiskey on a Friday night. Would go out from say 10, 11 o'clock at night. You know, 10 o'clock in the morning we're still out somewhere, and he'd order a bottle of whiskey and he'd just take the cap off and throw it away. So we don't leave till we're finishing the bottle. I'm like, dude, it's already 10 in the morning. We've had a good night. He's like, shut up, sit down. We're still going. Many nights like that. But but I couldn't really, didn't want to keep up with that level. you know. So and it was enough as it was. So he was dating this girl for a while who turned out to be the owner of a Ginza club, you know? So, well, she'd come round our house, and then we'd end up going to her house. It'd be like, we were socializing. She became part of our social life for a few months before I think he actually left the country, or they broke up. But even when they broke up, they were still kind of friends. But he'd actually left the country, and gone back home actually, and gone to get a job, etc., get on with his life. But after he'd actually got married and left Japan, Kari and I were still friends, and well, and I was quite surprised. I thought, this woman who's having, like, her club is Ginza. It's an expensive place to go. If you sit down, it's $500 just to sit down at the table, and then a bottle of whiskey, it's another $500. So if you got four people at the table, that's four people paying $500 a head each, plus a bottle of whiskey, 500. You're already looking at this 2,500 just for the evening. And they charge extra for the little snacks that you buy and things. Um, Now the rip-off places, they charge you $100 if you touch the jelly beans or something. That's the scam places. But the proper institutions, they run at a certain level, and they also run by trust and relationship too. So they don't actually scam their customers. In fact, it can go the other way around. There's such a trust relationship with these businesses that if a customer doesn't have the money to pay the mama-san, the boss, the woman, the mama-san will just say, "Oh, no worry, dear, you pay me next time," and they have to swallow sometimes debt, which they some customers don't pay, and it can be months going past. And I've seen her go white in the face once because she's like, oh, that guy has come, like, every night for the past 2 weeks and he still hasn't paid yet, and he actually still didn't pay from his last month bill. And then suddenly they turn up with like $20,000 and say, yeah, sorry about that, keep you waiting, and it's all back again. But as a mama san, she couldn't actually approach and put pressure on her customer because that would be breaching the etiquette, and she might lose that customer. They might get angry with her. So they're playing this, it's a hard thing. And when the economy crashed, as it has a few times in the last decades, a lot of those institutes actually went down because a lot of outstanding bills did not get paid. But things were based on trust. Yeah, there was not credit cards. It was like, I know you, okay, you're fine, and I'll wait for, for them to pay. So, and yeah, but for also these places, the more expensive they are, the higher up the ladder in the corporate world the customers were. So, people had to be at least an owner of their own business, or they had to be like, directing manager of a large corporation. People from Toyota, and I mean, Itochu, and some of the biggest names in Japanese corporations. People in the upper management level, you'd find these kind of people coming to these clubs and getting to know each other. The mama-san is the person who starts to play the contacts game and introduce her power is actually introducing businessmen to others. And some of these people even get kickbacks for business deals that they've helped negotiate or manage. And mainly it's all through introductions. So if they find out one of their customers needs a certain something, they might go, oh, yeah, well, let me go through my Rolodeck here. Yeah, no, this guy's a good customer of mine. Let's have a word with him. And so a lot of deals are actually done that way too. So they form this kind of liquid flow in the business world as well. So 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 yeah, so Kaori Sun was quite in this kind of respected high end kind of lifestyle. But what surprised me is that she was often alone in the weekends. You know, and I'd call her on a Saturday and say, "Oh yeah, what are you doing tonight?" She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just at home." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, well, she'd be like, oh yeah, we'll come around and we'll do some shabu shabu or something, and maybe I'll make some miso soup, and I'd be like, oh okay, and I'd go around to her house. It was a little apartment. It was a nice one, of course, but and you know, actually, she didn't really wasn't really even to cooking. We'd end up going out to a cheap tendon place usually, or bringing it home. We'd do some takeaway food, and we'd sit in her house watching TV, just kind of, you sort of think it's going to be this big action life where it's full of, like, huge parties and champagne going everywhere. But that's her day job. So her nightly life was like that. But on the weekends, I think the clients had their families to go to, and you'd assume that she'd have a boyfriend or whatever. But at that time, she wasn't. She was single, and I, I I was kind of single. I think I was, but the thing is, we were just buddies. She liked she liked bald guys with big bellies. You know, she liked old guys, and that was her type of guy. And well, she wasn't exactly my type, but we got along well and had fun together. But we were just buddies, and I spent like Christmas Eve at her place. I think I slept on the floor at her place on New Year's. Traditionally New Year's time in Japan is everybody's with their families, and it's very, and I knew she was going to be alone again because I think her mother was ill anyway. I can't remember what the story was, but so me and she had a friend as well that we would always hang out with as a group of three of us, and yeah, so we were just good buddies, and yeah, but I knew that she knew a lot of powerful people. Actually, sometimes she would have a barbecue at her house, and a couple of times I met some very impressive people there because they were customers, that long-term customers that earned the sort of the privilege of being invited by the mama-san to come to her home to have a barbecue on the terrace. And sometimes I'd get a call and Kari would say, "Hey, Gerard, if you're free, I'm having a barbecue." And I thought, well, yeah, this could be interesting. And always, it was always there'd be one or two, there would be one or two other people there normally. There might be another girl from the club, because okay, she was the mama-san, and maybe she had 10 other pretty women who were be dressed to the nines on a Monday to Wednesday, but on the weekends everybody's casual. Um, and we'll be sitting around having a barbecue. But the guys who came were, they'd give me the business cards at the end. I'll be going, damn, this guy's like, uh, deputy president, or what do you call Fukukaicho, is like a vice vice president of a large trading company in Japan. It's kind of people that I'd never get to meet easily. If you wanted, I was a salesman at the time. I think that was the time I was doing sales and for Japan Inc. If I wanted to try and get through the front door to have a meeting to sell our advertising that I was hocking off at the moment for the business magazine, to get to a person like that, it could take months or never. You'd get blocked at every point to try and get to the top. And like this being introduced this way, if I had have had a if I had have said to them, I never, almost never, I don't think I did actually try and take advantage of that. But if I had have said, hey, put me in contact with your advertising department, because why didn't I do that? I'm all the possibilities. Damn, yeah, I should have said, hey, put me in touch with with your advertising division. I want you to advertise with me. If he said yes, it would happen. You know. So I was getting my 20% commission for the advertising sales in those days. But once again, I was just as happy to hear their stories because these were highly educated people, highly experienced, and yeah, just hanging out with them in a chilled environment was nice because, and it wasn't high alcohol, wasn't one of these evenings where they would end up drunk on the floor. It was all very civilized, and so it was quite nice. And and so yeah, one night, where was I? Oh yeah, I was at home when it was midnight on like a Tuesday or Wednesday night. Work night for me, and I think I'd already got to bed. Phone rings, and Kaori says, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm at home." She's like, come into Ginza for some drinks. I've got somebody I want to introduce you to." I'm like, I'm like, really? I'm like, look, I'm already in bed. She's like, dude, come on. I just want to introduce you to this guy. I've been talking to him about you, and he wants to meet you. And I said, who is he? She's like, oh, well, he's a businessman. He does like he's the president of like a Bluetooth technology company, and he wants to talk to you. I was like, "Oh, okay." I was all right. Put on my suit and tie as you do in Japan at 12 o'clock at night. But I mean, I put the suit on because he said that he was uh, a big owner of a company, and normally these guys are going out after work, so they've got their suit and tie on. So I went out there to this club and introduced me, and then I thought this guy wants to meet me. He didn't really seem to be like really talking to me very much. It turns out he didn't speak any English, so he was a little bit shy. And the reason he wanted to meet me was because he knew I spoke Japanese. But I think he spent the first half an hour just trying to sort of suss me out. But I just took it slow, took it easy. I think I even offended him because I ended up, I started to have a bit of fun with the girls who were there, and was, bouncing around the room with one of them because I thought, well, this guy doesn't seem to want to talk after all. So hey, the girls are there and they're being friendly to the guests. Of course, they've got to build atmosphere. and so they're treating everybody like they're they're James Dean. And of course, if I walk in there, I was a lot younger and I was a foreigner a little bit more because the girls were a little bit more excited, of course. And so, so they were giving me the James Dean treatment too. And I played along, but I could see that he suddenly wasn't really so impressed that I was getting attention from the ladies. So I saw that and thought, okay, tone it down, you know. Sat down and yeah, and then he was like, okay, so Cody tells me that you've been working here in the business world and you used to work for the Japanese government. I'm like, yeah, I used to work for JETRO, the Japan External Trade Organization. And so, I learned about regulations and international trade and the different policies and learning about the markets here in Japan. And he's like, well, I'm doing a Bluetooth company, and you might have seen these cars that we have Bluetooth technology which connects everything to everything, and with this earpiece here, you can answer your phone, you can listen to the music from your car. I don't know what else it did, but it was like a fully, there was multiple things that were possible through this earpiece. Actually, there was an earpiece and there was one you hang around your neck. Um, and yeah, it turns out he'd made his fortune, this. But then he said, well, um, but my real passion is Formula racing. And I'm the owner of a Formula 3 team. And I'm like, Formula 3, what's that? I said, I know Formula 1. And I said, what's Formula 3? He's like, well, one day it would be nice to be Formula 1. In fact, that's something else I'll talk about later. But yeah, I've got a Formula 3 team, and well, it's sort of a lower rank, of the Formula driving. But kind of start long story short, he said, my plan is I want to be the first person to form a fully Japanese Formula One team. And he said, look, on the weekend, we're going to, at Motegi Race Circuit, we've got Formula 3 race. Come along, VIP pass, come along, have lunch with the drivers, and just get yourself familiar with it if you'd like to. Are you interested in coming to watch Formula 3? I was like, yeah, that'd be great, that'd be fine. I said, look, I don't have my driver's license, but I don't mind coming to watch cars. He's like, what, you have a driver's license? What's wrong with you, boy? And yeah, he's like, oh, well, actually, I've got a driver myself, so I don't need to. I hardly drive the car myself. He said to save face for me. But yeah, so in the weekend, I ended up going to a Formula 3 race, and it was great. I had a lovely little pass. I could go wherever I want, and I ended up walking onto the track. And when they had their breaks, I could talk to the drivers. In fact, they had bento box lunches arranged for us, and a couple of few other people were there. Um, and yeah, the drivers were sitting at the same table. They were like eating my lunch here, and there's like famous. I had no idea who they were, but they were famous drivers. Benoit was a French driver, and Sato. No, I don't know if it was Sato. That's the next guy. Yeah, these guys they were at the Formula 3 level, and the idea was, well, we want to get a Japanese driver to get his Formula 1 license. We want to get a Japanese engine. We want to get a Japanese chassis and put it all together and make the very first Formula One pure Japanese team. Because normally I had zero idea how it works, but I think maybe you have a engine from Mercedes Benz, maybe the chassis could be Toyota, and the driver might be from, yeah, in this case, he had a French driver, at least one of the guys was French. Um, so it would be like a hodgepodge, and then but it would be put together under the flag of maybe one country or whatever. But his dream was to have as I say, engine, chassis, driver, all Japanese. And he was getting ready to make the what do you call it, when you're put in for a bid. There was turned out there was him and there was another team who were putting in to get to win the rights to put together the first team. So so I was like, okay, well that's pretty cool. So Cody had introduced me to him. She was there doing all the go between stuff while I was there at the races. And in fact, I think I went two or three times. Ended up going to the Formula Three races like that. Oh no, she also invited me to the MotoGP through another client who was a Bridgestone executive, and also got the VIP pass to enter the Bridgestone um, um, MotoGP that was won that year by Rossi, I think an Italian driver. And now that I'm living in Mallorca, it turns out we've got a local hero in the MotoGP circuit as well too. And I can't remember his name now. But I had zero idea actually about these sports. Just what I'd seen on TV. So um, yeah, so a couple of weeks later, he actually called me into a meeting at his office, and uh, yeah, and I was sitting at this table. It was all suddenly got all very formal. He just said, "Look, I'm having a meeting in my office about the Formula One team. Are you interested in being involved?" And I said, "Yep, sure. Whatever I can do, I can interpret, I can translate." So I don't know about Formula One. He's like, "No, that's fine. But I need somebody to communicate with the outside world because Formula One is an international business, and we're moving location for each race is in a different country. We're dealing with a bunch of you know people from all around the world, and I need someone like you to to be my mouthpiece or to be an intermediary." And I'm like, "Yeah, cool, no problem." So I turn up to this meeting one day, and in the meeting room, in the boardroom, and I walk in. Oops, this has all got very formal here. And I'm sitting down one end, and he stands up, and he says, "Okay, this is the plan. We're going to make a Formula One fund." And it cost like what it was. I don't know, was it 40 or $80 million entry fee to get into the Formula One? And they've got Honda who's going to put in 80 million. They're also going to do, might have been the engine. I'm forgetting the details now. I must have written this down somewhere. They've got there was a young Japanese guy there who was only, he looked like he was like 19 or 20 years old. They said, such and such here. Wish I could remember his name. That might have been Sato. Um, he's in the go kart or Daytona karts or whatever, getting his license in the United States, but they want to promote him to get his license as soon as possible, and they want to promote this young guy to be the first Formula, well, not the first, but one of the first Japanese Formula One level races. And I had no idea at the time, but there's actually quite a big gap, even between the Formula Three guys getting up to level Formula One. It actually, it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, for me, if it's Formula Three, this is amazing. But you know, um, Takuma Sato, what was his name? And there was some other. Oh, gee, I'll have to go back to my notes now. I used to know all these names off by heart. But the Japanese guy of the Formula Three team, he ended up being promoted prematurely. So somehow he got his license for Formula One, didn't do so well, and I think he was demoted again. But somehow he managed to get his Formula One license in all of this. The young guy um, who I met at that meeting, I don't know if he made it at that time. I'll have to look up Google and see how his career's gone since then. That was 2006, maybe 2007. So yeah, so I was at this meeting. He stands up and he's like, "Okay, we've got Honda. The representative from Honda was there. Yes, he's going to put in 80 million. We've got this other company. They're going to put in another 50, 60 million. Um, we've got Mr. What's his name? The driver. He stands up, da 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 da, and he points down the end of the room and he goes, "Oh, and we've got Gerard here for international, relations or international communications guy." And I'm like, I was like, "What is it?" Oh, stand up, yes, thank you. Yoroshiku onegai itashimasu. Domo domo. Hajimemashite, Gerardo de gozaimasu. Yeah, you know, he didn't tell me I was going to have to present myself or say anything. He just sort of said, "Yeah, and we have Gerard here," you know. So I stood up, sat back down again, thought, "Oh God, hope he's not going to ask me any more questions," because he was going around and saying, "Yeah, for the promotions, they've got this guy who from Avex Tracks, which is a big, entertainment company, um, and some star actually, some Mark. He was a half Japanese guy. He was a star in the 90s when I was younger. He was at the table too, as well, because he was going to be like the entertainment aspect face was this guy. And yeah, they were just throwing millions around the table, saying, "Yeah, well, we're going to, a plan is to accumulate $200 million this way to start a Formula One fund, and then we're going to put the package together and we'll present it, and hopefully we'll win the tenure to get the Formula One team." And that meeting finishes, and the secretary calls me into the office. I'm waiting around, and in the meantime, one of the other bosses comes in, and she sits to me and says, "Look, so Gerard, in our company, we have a factory in China which makes all our Bluetooth equipment. And as I know you speak Chinese, you are working in the Chinese manufacturing industry. I was doing a sourcing business in 2000, 2000, not 3, 4, 5, 5, 6. Oh yeah, what year was that? 2003, 2003, 4, 5, around that kind of time. I was doing a sourcing business in China with my Spanish friend Ramon. It was his business idea. So that, they knew I'd had some experience visiting factories and doing quality checking and stuff like that. So they said, "Look, we've got this factory in China, a facility there if you're interested in working on that side, or we've got the Formula One department. Which one would you be interested to work with?" And I was, in my mind, I was going, "Bloody hell." I said I'd jump on the Formula One opportunity like hell, but I just sort of played it down. I was like, "Well, yeah, in typical Japanese style, I got to play things down. Yeah, perhaps the Formula One might be more suited as it's using more English." And perhaps, my mind was racing. I thought, Formula One, bomb, this is the whole world, Imagine being sent to every location and having to meet and communicate with all these different aspects of putting together one race. It would be an amazing logistical experience to live, to learn, and to get through. So compared to a factory in China, I was kind of like, well, I think the Formula One is actually, more suitable for me. And she's like, "Okay, all right, well, that's great." And then AG, his name was AG, came in at the end of the meeting, comes in, says, "Hey, so what did you think? Enjoy the meeting?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, well, what do you think? You keen to join us?" I was like, well, I was thinking, well, he just introduced me like I was already part of the team, and now he's asking me if I want to join him. So, what's going on here? And I thought I'd been made an instant part of the team. And he's like, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, well, that's cool, that's cool. I'm glad you're keen to join us, but I don't want, I want a worker, I want a worker who's dedicated to me and committed to me. I don't want these foreigners who just turn up and party and muck around. I need somebody committed." And I was like, "Okay, you got me. I know the Japanese way, I know the play." And I did see how his employees were behaving at the Formula 3 track. I was their invited guest, but his employees were, he was really on us actually to support the team. When his drivers were driving, everybody had to wave flags and shout, and with a lot of compassion. You've seen the videos of people greeting Kim Jong Il and jumping up and down and crying. It was, I kind of felt that kind of pressure that he was watching how I was being a team member. Even before that actually. So I sort of I could feel those eyes at the back of the neck, and so I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, go for it." And one of the guys, two of the guys actually had these big flags and were like showing their over enthusiasm for supporting the Formula One, Formula Three drivers. So I sort of realized that, yeah, okay, this is going to be a typical Japanese, you know, tyrannical kind of your whole life is mine. And I mean, you get your rewards, I guess, but basically your life, your ass belongs to us, kind of thing. But anyway, if it was for Formula One experience, I thought, yep, well, that would be worth it. So, and at the end of the day, he lost the bidding, and it went to the Aguri Super Aguri team, which was led by Japan's first Formula One driver back in the 70s or 80s. There was one guy who had made it into Formula One, and he was the one who was finally given the honor of establishing the very first Formula One all Japanese team. And didn't hear back from AG. Don't remember being invited back to the circuit after that. And I think, yeah, my sort of life had moved on from that chapter. But what an amazing experience to be put in the middle of all that excitement just for that short time, anyway. So that was a long one.